For most people, the Balrog being awoken in Moria was a combination of bad luck and greed. As the tale goes, the dwarves, in their never-ending search for more mithril, delved too greedily and too deeply, and then stumbled across the Balrog. The Balrog would kill King Durin VI, becoming known as Durin's Bane, and a year later, Moria was abandoned. But what if I told you that the Balrog being awoken wasn't just due to chance, and that Tolkien himself stated that it was probably due to Sauron? Okay, so what I just mentioned in the introduction is the official tale. The mountains of Moria were renowned for the super valuable metal known as mithril, and after the destruction of Numenor, Moria was the only known place in the world where mithril could still be found. But the problem is that after thousands of years of constant mining, mithril was becoming harder and harder to find. So, spurred on by their greed, inflamed by a ring of power, the dwarves delved deeper and deeper beneath Barad-dûr, or Caradhras, and so the tale goes, they stumbled upon the Balrog. The Balrog had been hiding in the depths of the mountains since the fall of Morgoth in the First Age. As we know from the fight between Gandalf and the Balrog, there were tunnels and caverns far deeper than even the dwarves had reached, filled with the horrible nameless things, and the Balrog had used these tunnels to get to his hiding spot. Upon being awakened in 1980 of the Third Age, he was pissed, and he quickly managed to kill King Durin VI, becoming Durin's Bane. The following year, he slew the new king Nain I, and the dwarves realized that they could not hold Moria, so they abandoned it. The official story is that the dwarves brought this destruction upon themselves, and therefore they are the ones that are commonly blamed. As Gandalf says in Moria, the dwarves delved too greedily and too deep, and disturbed that from which they fled, Durin's Bane. The elves of Lothlorien fled in large numbers following the awakening of Durin's Bane, and many of those that remained, including Lord Celeborn, who took up residence there afterwards, also blamed the dwarves. Relations between the two people rapidly deteriorated, and we can see this represented in how Gimli is later treated in Lothlorien. He would have been forbidden from the land, and therefore must walk blindfolded. But what if I told you that the story might not be so simple? That yes, even though the dwarves were the ones that physically unearthed the Balrog, they might not have been totally responsible and instead might have been set up for failure. Because Tolkien actually tells us that Sauron, because who else would it be, might have played a role in the awakening of the Balrog. The first mention is in the appendices, so it's been around for a long time. It came to pass that in the middle of the Third Age, Durin was again its king, being the sixth of that name. The power of Sauron, servant of Morgoth, was then again growing in the world, though the shadow in the forest that looked towards Moria was not yet known for what it was. All evil things were stirring. The dwarves delved deep at that time, seeking beneath Barad-dûr for mithril, the metal beyond price that was becoming yearly ever harder to win. Thus they roused from sleep a thing of terror, flying from Thangorodrim, had lain hidden at the foundations of the earth since the coming of the host of the West, a Balrog of Morgoth. The interesting part of this quote is that Sauron's power was growing again, and thus evil things were stirring. This is kind of a general statement. Evil things usually refer to creatures like orcs or trolls, who always became more active when the shadow was heavier upon Middle-earth. However, it's specifically stated that the shadow in the forest, the necromancer, aka Sauron, who dwelt in Dol Guldur, was looking towards Moria. This is made even more interesting by the note that Tolkien left. In the quote, he says that the dwarves roused the Balrog from sleep, but after that he leaves a note saying, or released from prison, it may well be that it had already been awakened by the malice of Sauron. This is kind of a vague statement because what does malice of Sauron mean? Does it mean that his increasing strength was felt by Durin's Bane, and that's why he awoke? Or does it mean that Sauron actively awoke the Balrog? This isn't the only time Tolkien attributed the Balrog's awakening to Sauron. In The Nature of Middle-earth, in one of his notes, Tolkien also specifically links Sauron to the Balrog. It is not recorded how long Amroth had been king of Lorien, but either as hereditary chieftain, associated with Galadriel and Celeborn as advisors and guardians, or alone in times of their absence, he must have dwelt ever since Third Age 1000 in growing disquiet until the disaster, no doubt ultimately due to Sauron, of 1980, when a Balrog arose in Moria, and it was abandoned by the dwarves and became filled with the servants of Sauron. Nimrodel and many others of the Sylvan folk fled south, and Amroth, seeking for Nimrodel, never returned. Lorien would no doubt have been deserted and left open to Sauron if Celeborn and Galadriel had not returned and taken over the rule, supported by the elves of Noldorin and Sindarin origin, who were already a large part of the people of Lorien. So, once again, Sauron is blamed for what happened in Moria. So the question is, how? The official story is that the dwarves stumbled upon the Balrog due to greed and bad luck. How can Sauron possibly be blamed for that? Because Tolkien never specifically tells us, we kind of have to guess for ourselves. The first possibility is that Sauron was indirectly responsible, and that his growing strength caused the Balrog to awaken. Remember, the Balrog could sense power, such as when he senses either Gandalf, the One Ring, or both in Moria. Then, the Balrog, having imprisoned itself, either purposefully or accidentally, may have found a way to lure the dwarves to free it. That would absolve the dwarves of much of the blame and place more of it upon Sauron. The other possibility for Sauron being indirectly responsible is the Ring of Power that the Longbeard dwarves bore at this time. This is specifically stated to have made the dwarves more greedy, and so it might have been a big driver behind the dwarves delving too greedily and too deep. It's also possible that the power of Durin's ring might have awoken the Balrog. Honestly, given that Sauron didn't know how the Rings of Power would affect the dwarves, I do actually kind of find it difficult to blame him for this. However, Sauron being directly responsible is a lot more sinister. Once again, while we're not told how Sauron might have been responsible, it is interesting that Tolkien says that Sauron's attention was on Moria at the time, almost like he was planning something or waiting for something to happen. This might imply that Sauron somehow found out about Durin's Bane, actively awakened him, and then may have somehow guided the dwarves to that ticking time bomb that was beneath them. If this is the case, then yeah, Sauron is 100% responsible for what happened in Moria. But the question is once again, how would this even happen? Firstly, how would Sauron have found out about the Balrog before it awoke? It seems unlikely he personally found the Balrog, as that would have required Sauron to pass through the depths of the earth, where the Nameless Things were, which according to Gandalf, Sauron doesn't even know about. Another possibility is that some of Sauron's servants somehow came across the Balrog. We do know that Sauron did send his servants into the Misty Mountains. They would have reported back to Sauron, he would have put two and two together and realized it was a Balrog, and would have worked out that it was underneath Moria. Then he would have realized that he had a golden opportunity to screw over the dwarves. So then, how does Sauron bring the two together? As I said earlier, it's possible that Sauron's attention on Moria was because he was putting forth his influence to awaken the Balrog. Alternatively, he might have sent physical servants to do the deed. Meanwhile, he might have directed the dwarves towards the Balrog with rumours and whispers of more mithril in that direction. There's evidence of Sauron doing this with the dwarves on other occasions. Balin's doomed expedition into Moria might have been caused by similar meddling, as Glowin heavily implies at the Council of Elrond. If you think about it, the plan does make perfect sense, and does seem like something Sauron could pull off. Influence the dwarves into destroying themselves, with possibly the elves of Lothlorien as collateral damage. But I will admit, even for myself, it's hard to come to terms with the idea that Sauron orchestrated the whole thing. It's hard to believe that Sauron or his servants just somehow stumbled across the Balrog before anyone else did, and it's hard to simply discard the whole idea that the dwarves did it to themselves, because that's the most widely told story. But I can't ignore the whole idea that Sauron played a part, because Tolkien explicitly states that Sauron did play a role. It's just that we don't know what he did exactly, and whether it was direct or indirect. We're left with a range of possibilities. Did Sauron indirectly awaken the Balrog due to his malice or due to the Ring of Power? If so, then how much can we truly blame him? Apparently enough, according to Tolkien. If we can blame him, then he must have played a pretty major role in the whole situation. But then, what did he do? J.R.R. Tolkien annoys me sometimes. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. I have to give credit to a Reddit user named 123CWahoo on Tolkien fans for this video. A few weeks ago, he posted the reference that can be found in Nature of Middle-earth, which I had missed because it's found right in the last few pages of the notes. And yeah, of course a topic like this deserves a video because it changes the way we think about a major event in Middle-earth. Cheers, farewell, and remember, everything that goes wrong in my life is due to Genghis Khan's malice.